So hi everyone. I'm here with Ellie Sykes today, who's in charge of credit risk and analytics at recruiting at MERJE. So Ellie, thanks very much for joining me. It's really welcome. Great to see you again. So it's kind of interesting. I want to chat to you a little bit about what you've seen in the recruiting market, particularly around, I suppose, your kind of field. I mean, so what have you seen over the last few months, particularly in terms of since COVID, and we've had lockdown since, etc. So what are the themes you've been picking up?
Well, unsurprisingly, we were very quiet over the summer, which is to be expected. I did have a handful of roles and a little bit of recruitment still going on. I think things that were already in process. But I went from having anything like 30, 40 vacancies to less than 5. So you could see there was a dramatic decrease during that period. But really, I'd say from late August through September, things have definitely picked up, even with this most recent lockdown, both across the permanent and contract market, for various different reasons, I think. Some businesses were recruiting prior to COVID. I think that need is still there, and they've come out the other side and ready to recruit again. Some businesses are still looking to expand even, or had plans that were put on hold that they still want to put in place. So things are looking good. If you're in the credit risk analytics space at the moment, we're getting busier day by day, week by week at the moment.
So when it kind of hit, so it sounded like there were some roles that were sort of in the pipeline and everything just stopped. Was that what you kind of thought? And then the roles that are coming back, so are they new roles to react to what's happened, or or is it just like continuation? Like we've said, well, we've waited a while and now we just need to carry on hiring the roles we did. Or do you think there's net new roles in the market?
I think it's a bit of both. Yeah, I think it's always been a very buoyant market. There's always been a real need for strong analytics people, and that was never going to go away. I think, yes, definitely some of them were roles that I had at the start of the year. The clients said, look, I'll come back when we can move on this, and they have done. But I do think there's new projects out there. Some businesses, some of my clients are doing well. I've got clients not just across FS who some of the loans businesses are actually doing well, but also retail businesses. I work with some of the catalogue businesses, and obviously they're seeing an increase in customers.
The mail order.
Yeah, purchasing items from home, and they've got some really impressive credit risk and analytics functions. So arguably they've got the budget to expand those areas.
Yeah. So, and do you think what's happened with the pandemic, do you think that's changed the nature of what people are doing actually in the firms? I mean, are they looking at different things? Are they looking at, is it put a greater emphasis on some of the analytics?
Maybe a little bit, but largely I think unchanged from what I've seen from my perspective. So the roles that I've got coming in now are your credit risk analyst to work on particular portfolios that were there anyway. I think maybe there was a bit of focus on collections and analytics around that area, but that's been the case for many years, really. So I think largely unchanged. It's still the same roles that were there before.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from what I've seen, I suppose it's going to have a big impact on collections. The collections team took a big hit in terms of like volumes of calls coming through, and then look on the data side, all the dynamics around the attributes, the way people's behaviors was being recorded. I mean, all of that's changed, right? Which now means you've got to, like, if that throws up everything in the air, does that mean now we've got to reanalyze everything? Have we got to remodel everything? Have we got to like look at everything, which could put demand in terms of those kind of skills? Or maybe that hasn't come through yet.
Maybe. I do think some of the regulatory projects, the bigger projects, were put on hold, definitely, and that there was a lot of contractors in that space, the IFRS 9 stuff. So those kind of projects, I think, went on hold while they were doing the. Obviously there was a lot of analysis around the mortgage payment holidays, so that will have definitely had an effect. But the other bigger projects, portfolio analytics, etc., that's still going to be modelled in the same way it always has done.
So going back to analytics and some of the data stuff, I mean, if there were like different skill sets, I suppose they're in demand now. What would you say the big ones that are really in demand sort of now, really, I suppose?
I mean, it's a very high demand area anyway, because there's very few businesses who are saying, I want to do less with my data. So there was already a real increase in the need for the skill set to analyze data, but also effectively say, what does that mean for a business? I think that's where the true important skill lies.
The understanding.
Yeah, to be a good analyst and to be able to manage the data effectively, but then translate that, you have the business acumen and understanding into say, what business decisions do we need to make off the back of this analysis? And that's what everybody's looking for, whether that be in collections analytics, data science, decision science, pure credit risk, or the modelers. They're all different forms of looking at it, but then what does that mean for a business?
So it's like that perfect blend of almost like the technical side of it, and making sure you're doing the maths, I suppose, and the technical, but then also the business understanding as well to interpret it.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. And what about front end versus back end? I know by front end it's almost like, certainly I've spent a lot of time looking at the collections impact and almost like the back end, right, in terms of what the impact's going to be from that, and like segmentation, the modeling that happens with that, and do attributes change. But then there's also that front end in terms of growth as well, and from an acquisition point of view, which is often had a lot of recruitment that's going on, because it's been that's been a big focus area. Have you seen any kind of shifts from that, or is it's still the same, or is acquisition sort of like seemed like it almost like stopped, everyone paused, but now it's going to go back, right? So the people have to start building revenue rather than with all this cost that's going on with the lockdowns. Any kind of have you sort of seen that kind of shift?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think typically, historically, when recruiting, it's been a broad range across the credit risk life cycle. And I think, yeah, you're right. A lot of people just, weren't interested in acquisitions. It's like focus on what we're doing now and the customers we've got. But I think that will change. I think that there were a couple of roles with an acquisitions focus, but that was more fit into the idea that it was a role at the start of the year that then they still had a need for going forward. So I think you're right. I think that did halt a little bit, but I expect it to go back to how it was previously.
Yeah. And what kind of time frames do you think we're looking at now in terms of going back to the way things were?
If it hadn't been for the second lockdown, I would have said that we would just continue to get busier and busier. And certainly that's the phase I'm in now at the moment. Every day I've got a client saying something will be coming up, or we're looking for this type of skill set. A number of my clients are saying maybe Q1 next year, so can't do anything at the moment, but Q1 next year. So I think it's going to be interesting to see the next couple of months in the run up to Christmas. If we do just hold it at this current lockdown and then things open up again in December, I think that will probably happen. If it ends up being longer than that and we take further steps backwards, I'm not sure if it will push it further into next year.
Do you think this lockdown was expected by employers or not?
I think it's really hard. It's really hard.
Did you expect? I mean, I don't know if I expected or not. Kind of part of me kind of like said, well, I probably thought it was going to happen, but it still came as a bit of a surprise when it actually got announced on the Saturday, right? And I know there were massive queues at the supermarket. Everyone's buying toilet paper and cans of beans. I mean, how many cans of beans can you actually eat, right? But it felt like it came as a bit of a surprise, and it's just interesting to see if that happens from a recruitment point of view as well.
Yeah, from my perspective, personally, I agree. I don't know why it was a surprise, because it was almost inevitable looking at the statistics, wasn't it? I think it was a bit of a surprise. I don't know about my clients. I think what happened was we got so well set up for home working during lockdown 1 that I actually think from a corporate perspective, lockdown 2 is having less of an impact on my clients. I think if you were in a retail sector, with physical premises as opposed to mail order, then I think that would have been like a second hit. But I think what happened with my clients is that everyone's so well set up for home working, especially these kind of analysis roles, which can totally be done by home, from home, that I think the second lockdown hasn't had that much of an impact on most of my clients, because some of them haven't even been back in since the first. So, they've got slicker at home working, they've got slicker at onboarding people, and a lot of my clients are happy to say, we'll courier out laptops, we'll get you on board, we'll do your induction remotely, you know. So I think that that's why I'm seeing this continued you know, improvement in activity, because they got things straight the first time, so it's had less of an impact the second time.
Yeah, it almost feels like we were, the first lockdown, we were always like hunkered down waiting to see what's going to happen, and then it got to the summer, it's like, well, we just have to get on with it now. So whatever it is, we have to get on with it. So we have to, might as well hire, we got to try and, you know, make the best of what we've got, really, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
How do you feel about the future of home working then, in terms of, like, you know, I mean, are people hiring remote, or are they hiring you know, in the office? I mean, I imagine there's been a change recently, but what's your views kind of like going forward? I mean, what are the trends there?
That's been the biggest shift in my recruitment that I've seen. It is essentially shrunk the UK. So even I can think in the last month of candidates that I know historically were only looking for work in a particular location, who've picked up the phone to me and said, do you know what, I'll consider, you know, this city and this city as well, because who really cares where they are if I only have to go there once a week? And at the moment, you know, never. So I think that's had a real positive impact on a number of my clients. It's really brought them up to speed. Some of them were quite forward thinking on home working anyway, but a lot of them, if you think about traditional FS businesses, were less forward thinking when it comes to this area, who are now, you know, they've had to be open to home working, and now we've had a prolonged period of that working. It's very hard to say everybody's got to go back to being in the office when it's proven to work so well in the vast majority of cases. Most people are saying to me they enjoy it, or they like the flexibility. It's, you know, it hasn't hindered them, the ability for them to do the job. So that's had a real positive impact.
And do you think it's going to stick? Do you think homework is going to stick longer term? I mean, so let's say we found a vaccine, and something came out today about a vaccine that was 90% effective, and so the vaccine gets produced. Do you think it's going to stick, or do you think we're going to revert back to now being back in the office?
We'll never revert back to how we were before. It'll definitely, we'll have more of a slant, because as I say, it's proven to work so well for so many people, and so many of my candidates have said they enjoy it. You must have seen polls, put out polls and surveyed people to see what their thoughts are, and so many people have a positive view on it. So I don't think it'll ever fully shift back. I think once, you know, in that scenario you've just described, I think that of course lots of people will be expected back in, and team meetings, and I've heard analysts say they want to, you know, all sit round and look at a particular spreadsheet, and they haven't been able to do that as well. So there's definite merit. I've got a slight worry about the actual social side, that if this is to carry on, so conversely, if they didn't find a cure and this carries on for months and months and it's tipping into years, I think it will start to have an impact on people's social, even mental health side of things, because you get so much out of that social interaction, some more than others. So I think long term, yes, it's a positive that it's opened up the UK, it's opened up so many opportunities for people, and it's just a much more grown-up way of working. But I don't think we could continue with 100% home working for a prolonged period. I think that wouldn't be healthy for us all.
You get a bit stir crazy, you get a bit of cabin fever when you're in the same place all the time, right? And you just like, it's just nice just to be able to get out and go for coffee with someone, or those, and it just makes a huge relationship difference. So I don't know, that's my kind of feeling.
Yeah, I agree totally. I miss it very much so.
Yeah, and so how do you think? So if someone's taking a job at the other end of the country, let's say, you know, the one end of the country, and they live the other end of the country, and the whole thing changes. I mean, do you think people are going to be asked to then move, or to be able to commute back up, or do you think there's going to be a bit of, that'll be another wave of change that happens from an employment point of view, if they aren't sitting or being in the office?
Yeah, I mean, it's very client specific. Obviously, when I'm having discussions with candidates at the moment, from home, and they might be considering further afield, I think what it's meant is that we always say, and after COVID, how much are they expected to be in the office? Because these are permanent positions, so we need to have that conversation. I think what's changed is that the client will say, okay, they can come in once or twice a week, where previously it might have been a 5-day a week in the office, or 4-day a week in the office. So it's just meant that candidate can now handle that. That's acceptable work-life balance to come in once or twice, whereas they couldn't have done that location if it had been 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
So it's just that extra bit of flexibility, I think.
Yeah. And do you get any feedback from candidates or like people you talk to who are at employers in terms of, like, I suppose there's flexibilities, but then also, like, we're all having these video calls now as well, so we're all on video calls, and one of the things I'm finding is that, like, they're getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and they're getting more and more back to back. So I mean, any sort of view on stress levels, or I mean, how are people handling that? I mean, does anyone make any comments on that, or they're just happy to be at home?
I've spoken to a number of people who have said that it is back-to-back calls.
Yeah.
I think that has maybe chilled out a little bit from what I've seen. It's but I think you've got back the extra time in the day of your commute, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you only have to wander to your kitchen to get lunch. So I certainly find that I can speak to people. People pick the phone up more easily.
Yeah.
Whether that's a candidate because they're at home and they've got no one listening, or whether it's a client because usually someone would have collared them at the desk, but they've got a bit more time. There are definitely people who are doing back-to-back calls, but I think it's still, they're managing it okay in terms of it's no more stressful than being in the office.
Yeah. I think the rise of instant messenger is going to be quite interesting. It's like be it Teams or Slack, whatever it is, and that being able to, like, as an alternative to standing at the desk. It's almost like, do you actually message someone, like using Skype or something like that, or WhatsApp? And it's always been a good way of getting hold of people. But is that a bit of a replacement for the face to face and sort of thing, a little bit, because it's a little bit more informal interaction than, say, picking up the phone.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Really.
I think it's good because if you just want a really quick answer on something, or, like you say, an informal discussion about something without actually bothering someone and turning the camera on and stuff. And I do think there was a bit of a novelty factor initially around having all these calls and making sure everyone was okay at home. So I think instant message is that good kind of in between option. So
cameras on or cameras off? So I think people are either on or off. I mean, what's your have you seen a split on that?
I think it divides the nation, doesn't it? Like you say, you're one or the other. Personally, I very much prefer being a cameras off kind of person, and because I'm used to speaking on the phone to candidates all the time anyway, that I feel that works well enough for me. I totally see the benefit and why people do it, but my preference is camera off.
We can be camera off, or just maybe just not first. You can do that, right? So
warm up.
Yeah, warm up.
Warm into it.
On a call the other day, and talking about video calls actually in customer care, which I thought was interesting. And so some of the banks have already done that, but that was that's the first time. Is that going to be a trend? I think that'd be quite interesting as well. Just as we get more used to talking on video and sort of like seeing each other, and I think you realise that stuff going on in the background is maybe gets blurred out, and you just become less sensitive, I think, a little bit. I wonder if that'd be a new trend. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't do an awful lot of video calls, so that might explain my reluctance to turn my video on. But I think it is becoming the norm for a lot of people. You're right.
Yeah. So in terms of, like, future market, what you're kind of seeing. I mean, specific roles that people you think are gonna grow, or people should look out for, or positive or negatives, or what should people be sort of like almost like working towards now? Do you think? I mean, what's your view of the future?
I think the outcome in my area is as positive as it always was, because credit risk, there was a need before, arguably even more of a need. And it's a growing area. Same with analytics. I'm seeing a real focus on data science. But again, that was the case prior to COVID. So I think for my area, it hasn't changed. It halted a couple of things, but fintech is still going to be growing and a very exciting place to be. And in the very nature of those businesses, they're going to be looking for credit risk and analytics skill sets. So I think the outcome is still really, really positive. The contractor market will be an interesting one to watch, because obviously we are now saying everything's back on for IR35 in April. But but I don't believe that there won't be a need for contractors still in this area, unless there's some very strong consultancies out there, unless those consultancies can really pick up all that work, which I know a lot of the consultancies are doing really well.
From what you see, I mean, are there specific particular packages that people are looking for? I mean, how's that kind of changed over time?
Yeah, I mean, systems are very important for these types of roles. Again, as important as it is the person who's analysing the data is the system that you use. We've always seen a strong interest in people with skill sets in SAS and SQL. And, for many, many years, they've been strong packages that clients are looking for. But I have seen more of an increase in clients wanting candidates to have had knowledge of packages such as R and Python, especially the data science field. And I think they're really, becoming more and more popular.
So do you think those are going to replace some of the other packages, or do you think it's going to augment it?
It's hard to tell. I mean, cost plays a factor, doesn't it? And once a client has committed to one particular package, I think sometimes it's more difficult to shift. But I do see, there will be natural shifts across the marketplace, and Python certainly is something that's been asked for a lot at the moment.
So Python and I help a lot with like some of the modeling aspects and some of the data crunching, I suppose links into like data warehousing and those kind of things. Do you see any trends in terms of like, I suppose, visualization type software as well? So things like, BI type platforms or those kind of things. Are those becoming more popular, or any kind of trends or particular products that you think are more in demand than others?
That has stayed constant, really. Again, of course, that's a really important part when you look at the BI world, and more and more being asked for exposure to BI, even in roles that aren't 100% focused on BI, looking for the full BI stack. So yes, again, really, it always was going to be popular, and I think, as we've discussed, even more so going forward.
Yeah. But I suppose that the pure number crunching, is that the focus now in terms of like, I suppose the R piece and the Python piece? I mean, is that the bulk of the roles, or versus some of the analytical, I suppose, presentational type areas?
I think maybe for some of the very, very technical roles, yes, but I think the importance of someone to be able to communicate what that data is telling you and manage stakeholders and present that in a way that stakeholders can understand and make decisions off the back of. I think there's a lot of analytics roles where that's half of the job as well, which is tricky. I mean, it's a difficult skill set to have initially, but also the business acumen and communication and stakeholder management that's required as well. It's a very tricky role.
It's almost like it doesn't matter how technical it becomes or how much we enjoy looking through the maths. We're still people businesses, and we have to communicate it to people in terms of and make decisions around people who are our customers as well, I suppose. That's really the theme.
Yeah.
How does AI fit into all of this? I mean, that was a huge noise. I mean, like over the last few years, I mean, in terms of like, there's been a lot of noise made around that, and huge amounts of development that's kind of happened as well. And it kind of links into machine learning and the maths and all the modeling. I mean, they're intrinsically linked, right? I mean, they're kind of like one and the same. Do you think it's just a continuation, or do you think there's new stuff that's being developed from that kind of analytics point of view? Do you see that, or is that not really coming through?
I think maybe the AI stuff less over the last couple of months, maybe because like you say, it's a forward-thinking thing. And as we're just coming out of COVID, it's like, let's deal with what we're doing straight away now. I have seen an increase in machine learning type roles and a request of that type of skill set. So that's definitely still moving. I think it's a continuation. I think it's halted, in my function, it's halted things. COVID has. It's not pulled it backwards. It's not stopped it from happening. It's just paused what would already happen anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels to me like there's going to be so much pressure on revenue and costs as a result of really what's happened from a pandemic point of view, and everyone's going to be looking to try and like, how do I increase the revenue or decrease the cost, which is just puts more emphasis on, well, let's get more out of the data, and like, how can we use the analytics to do that or to mitigate risk and those kind of things. So it feels like that's going to be a cycle that's going to carry on quite a bit. carry on developing. Really, I mean, maybe it's not deep enough. Maybe that the market's not deep enough. That's why you need the contractors.
Maybe. I definitely think you're right about the margins, and your data can reduce your costs, your data can increase your revenue, whatever a particular business is focused on, whether it is collections or whether they are still looking to grow. There's some great businesses doing some really good stuff across fintech, especially at the moment. We recently attended the virtual credit awards credit strategy event, and you only have to attend one of those to see there's some great analytics functions in very established businesses doing some amazing things, but also some new players who, despite everything going on with COVID, have really expanded their analytics functions.
And I think it's been quite interesting the last few years, just in terms of the cost of some of these things and the amount of data that's available has gone down and gone up respectively. I mean, it's just huge amounts of data, and the cost of being able to analyze some of the things and the processing power is so much cheaper. And there's some real innovation that's going on elsewhere. I think it's quite exciting actually around, and some of the maths that's being used to try and drive some of those things is it really is fascinating, right? So
mind blowing.
And it's like, and the speed at which things can be done is interesting, and it's just like, and you sort of realize it when you attend some of the events, just in terms of just the scope of what's potentially out there, and that's often just the UK, right? I mean, there's huge amounts of stuff going on elsewhere, and you think we're all focused on it now, and now there's a need for it as well. So I did think it's incredibly dynamic. So, well, I mean, Eddie, thanks very much for spending the time. I really appreciate it. It's great to get your insight on the market. What's going on and where the future might hold for us. I mean, I know it's been a challenging time for all of us, but it sounds like certainly in credit risk, data analytics, it sounds like that's really a growing area, really. So.
Yeah, it really is, and the outlook I think is very positive for candidates in that area. Thank you for your time.
I know you're quite welcome. So thanks very much, and we'll speak to you soon.